In 2022, most people thought of Sabrina Carpenter as a Disney actress who was maybe, possibly going to have a music career. But by 2024, she had one of the biggest songs in the world, a cultural presence that felt almost unavoidable, and one aesthetic so fully realized that fashion magazines and psychology podcasts couldn't stop keeping their fingers on the pulse. What happened? Obviously, talent was there. Obviously, the music connected. But I want to look at something underneath the surface, because what Sabrina Carpenter pulled off is actually a textbook case study in one of the most powerful psychological mechanisms there is. And once you understand this, you will discover something very useful, perhaps fascinating about yourself. Hi there, my name is Kelly, and today we are exploring the psychology behind Sabrina Carpenter's Reinvention. And I want to stick around until the end to get the full and captivating story, because you don't want to miss this. Here's the psychological challenge that almost every former child star faces, and that most people face in smaller versions throughout their lives. When your identity is built inside one institutional container, let's say a label, a role, a relationship, a company, a scene, that container does a lot of the identity work for you. It tells you how to dress, how to speak, what you stand for, and who your audience is. However, when the container ends, there is a gap, and that gap is terrifying because you have to answer a question most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Who am I when no one is telling me who to be? What is interesting about Sabrina's trajectory is that she didn't try to fill the gap with something safe. For example, she didn't go adult contemporary. She didn't rebrand as something palatable. She actually went more specific, more herself. The camp, the wit, the unapologetic sexuality, the lyrical self-possession, none of that reads as committee design, right? It reads as someone who made a decision about who they're going to be and then committed fully to that version. By the way, for the record, I'm not part of Sabrina Carpenter's fan club, nor do I have a daughter who is. So I just want to clear this up. There is a psychological concept called identity coherence. In other words, the degree to which your external expression matches your internal self-concept. And research consistently shows that people with high identity coherence, those who are visibly living as themselves, are not only perceived as more charismatic and confident, but they actually experience less anxiety and higher resilience. What Sabrina Carpenter embodies, and I mean embodies literally, is one almost total coherence between internal identity and external expression. The music, the visuals, the humor, the interviews, the fashion, they are all saying the same thing. There is no visible gap between who she is off stage and who she is on stage. And the coherence is simply magnetic. Now compare this to artists who are clearly performing a persona rather than living one. I'm sure you may know a few. You can feel the distance, right? The inauthenticity creates friction. Because after all, full embodiment creates a pull. Now, here's where I want to bring in something that I feel explains this better than standard celebrity analysis does. Neville Goddard talked about a concept he called living in the end. In other words, not waiting for success before feeling successful, not waiting for recognition before carrying yourself as someone worthy of recognition. But the principle is that your outer reality is always a delayed reflection of your inner identity, which means the reinvention has to happen inside first. But what I found compelling about Sabrina's story, that's why I decided to work with this, is the timeline. Her album, Emails I Can't Send, released in 2022, already shows the fully formed version of her identity. The wit, the self-awareness, the emotional directness. The world just hadn't caught up yet, but she was already living in the end of her story before the commercial success arrived to confirm it. And that certainty, that's what made the eventual arrival feel inevitable rather than lucky. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yeah, but I'm not a pop star. How does this relate to me? I know, most of us are not pop stars, but the mechanism is identical. Wherever you are right now, there is a version of you that is more specific, more coherent, more fully yourself, that the version has been shaped by containers such as your jobs, your relationships, your expectations, your roles. And the question isn't whether the version exists, because it does. The question is whether you're willing to commit to it before it's confirmed. Because here's the thing about identity coherence. The world responds to it, not because it's magic, but because us humans are wired to trust people who are clearly themselves. In other words, confidence, magnetism, credibility, these are all the streams of identity clarity, not the other way around. So the question I want to leave you with is this. In what areas of your life are you still performing a version of yourself that belongs to someone else's container? And what would the more specific, more coherent version of you actually look like? So actually, Sabrina Carpenter didn't reinvent herself. What happened was she finally allowed herself to become more fully who she already was. The reinvention was really just the removal of everything that wasn't hers. And that process of stripping back, deciding, committing, is available to anyone. And if you like this type of content, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know the next time I upload new videos. Actually, you may also want to grab my free abundance activation kit, which codes a self-concept template and plenty of other resources to help you work from the inside out. So, this is what I have for you today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.